Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation on the importance of limiting WIP in Agile. My name is Lee Henson. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, and I am excited that you can join me for this presentation. Many people wonder how work in progress impacts their Agile implementation. The truth is, organizations that successfully limit WIP are much more likely to succeed with their Agile implementation. So let's dive in and see where this takes us. One of the questions that I often get when exploring Agile is, how do I find out more about this topic or other topics that might interest me? It's a great question. One of the ways that AgileDad has provided is a podcast that's called the Agile Daily Stand-Up Podcast. It's recorded every Monday through Friday, and each episode is always 15 minutes or less. The convenience is there, but in addition, the information is there as well. We love to have you join us and learn more about this topic or any other of the 750 topics that we've covered. And we're excited to let you know that you have the ability to search for the topic of your choice. We'd love to have you join us there and learn more about this topic. And let's dive in and talk more about the 5 keys. The reasons why organizations tend to ignore work in progress limits. Coming in right at the top, if you've heard these before in your organization, you're going to think that I'm living inside of your head. So here we go. Number 1, we have way too many things we need to get done. There's no way that we can just go with one thing at a time. We need to start all these initiatives, or else we'll never get through them all. How about number 2? We'll never know what's best if we don't try everything, because we all know that more is better, right? More is always better. Number 3, if we do a lot of things, we eventually hit what the next customer wants, that next new and exciting product, that next innovative thing. How about number 4? Income will 100% increase if we offer more products and services, because we'll have an expanded audience. And with that expanded audience, we'll definitely be able to engage better with our customers. Or how about this one, my favorite from leadership, number 5. You know the adage, if we just throw spaghetti at the wall, we'll see what sticks, because something's got to work. Now, what I can tell you is each of these are symptoms. They're symptoms that you're not actually honoring WIP limits. So the question then is, why is it so critical to have WIP limits? What benefit is this going to give us? Now, with leadership, when I ask this question, it often prompts a second question. How or can work in progress limits help us build the right thing? Now, there's a difference between building the right thing and building a thing right and building it fast. You need to make sure you have a balance between the 3. If you're building the right thing and building it perfectly right, oftentimes you'll miss that market opportunity to go to market, and you'll miss that window where it's ideal for you to build or release a product or service. Sometimes if you're building the thing right and you're building it really fast, you may not be building the right thing. The key is you need to understand the trade-offs and how work in progress limits can help. So let's set the stage. Let's talk about how this all begins. Inside of your organization today, you may be having many stakeholders who are coming over and shoulder tapping. When I say shoulder tapping, I'm referring to interruptions that happen within teams or between the stakeholders and the teams in the organization. There are many times where these interruptions are impactful in a negative way. So stakeholders are telling the team and the product owners and others, I just want to remind you that my work is the most important work that you can address today. Out of everything that you have on your plate, make sure you're focused on my initiatives today. The problem is when everyone in the organization feels that way, oftentimes developers or people who are producing the work are unable to determine which order they should be doing things in. Is there any stack rank order? Is there any objectiveness to what we're trying to do? So in order to get this problem resolved, in many cases, organizations will call a meeting where they gather all the stakeholders together, and many people who represent the stakeholders or represent the business, as well as people from strategic development and people who are in products or services. And they try to limit this meeting to anywhere from 15 to 20 people so that they can have meaningful conversation. Fast forward, when it's time for the meeting, we go to the meeting room expecting to see 15 to 20 people, only to find that either we have 0 to 2 people who arrive or 120 people who arrive for the 15-person meeting. This is where the nightmare occurs. Everyone goes into the meeting, everyone is fighting to show that their product or service should be the most important thing to work on. And what we quickly discover is that when we leave this meeting 90 minutes later, we're worse off than we were before we walked in. What we're seeing is that everything that we have put in front of us, when we ask, which of these is the highest priority? Which of these should we work on? We often hear these terms. Everything that we have is either high priority, really high, or really, really high. Everyone's afraid to say that something is medium or low because they're afraid that if they say that something is medium or low in priority, that means that it's simply unimportant. Now, we all know that that's not true, but many people struggle by believing that priority has some association or that priority and importance are synonymous. And the truth is, that's not correct. We simply can't do everything that we commit to do. And many organizations struggle because they confuse the word priority with importance. Priority should be associated with the word urgency. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're in an organization. When was the last time someone came to you and said, hey, I have these really unimportant things that I need you to do. I need them right away. But remember, they're not at all important. I'll tell you, if you have an organization that does that, I'd like to hear about it because that would be an interesting topic of study. The truth is, organizations always want to say that everything is important and that everything is urgent. And it gets frustrating. One of the things that we need to prove is that although things may all be important, that they all cannot have the same level of urgency. With that being said, many times we invite stakeholders in, or even leadership, to help us get this issue resolved. At which point leadership enters the room and they say, no, we don't want to disappoint anyone. We all should hold hands together as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death and watch our revenue plummet to zero because we don't want to discount any of these ideas as not being urgent or important. So as a result, we agree that we are going to work on everything at the same time. This couldn't be a worse scenario. The next step is we grab our star performer, the person who's the best on our team, and we say, Michelle, you're our only hope. So what we're going to do is divide your time evenly across these 5 major initiatives. On the first initiative, we'll have you work 94% of your time. The second one, 82% of your time. The third one, 76% of your time. The fourth one, 58% of your time. And the fifth one, 27% of your time. Because somehow if you add that together, that's going to be account for 100% of your time. Maybe it's Common Core math. I don't know how that works. But I do know that that's over allocation of someone who's very, very good at what they do. As a result, this causes burnout. And when associates get burnt out, especially some of your best associates, what you'll find is that delivery is severely impacted. The trick here is that we need to stop cross-allocating our star performers across all these things and make sure that we increase our team size to a size that's responsible, that's going to be able to get the work done in a timely manner. Oftentimes, as a result of this, we'll reduce the team size and cross-allocate the star performer to work with 1 or 2 individuals in an attempt to get everything done. But what we're actually doing is spinning up multiple things and not honoring WIP limits. So how can we do this, and how does this look in the real world? Many people are visual learners, so I thought it would be a good idea to give you a solid example. Something that you could refer to, something that you could fall back on, and something that you could share with your peers in leadership. In this example, we're going to use 2 5-year timelines. One timeline is going to represent your organization. We're going to call this organization Company A. The second organization is going to represent a fully scaled, trained, and coached Agile organization, also on a 5 year timeline. Now, to keep the math easy, both Company A and Company B have five major initiatives that they're trying to complete within this 5 year timeline. So far, so good. But Company A is in trouble. Company A has made the decision to begin all five of these major projects on day one. And they decided that they'll run for the full 5 years, and they've budgeted for the full 5 years to make certain that they could get all five of these deliverables completed in the shortest time possible. While on the surface, this may sound really good, what winds up happening is all of the associates work on all five of these projects, and they're often bouncing back and forth. Many people like to call this multitasking. The truth is, multitasking does not exist. This is simply context switching. Now, whether you're doing rapid context switching or slow context switching, it's still going to have a severe impact on the productivity of the team. So the team will go forth working for the entire 5 year spectrum, and they may complete four out of the five projects, which sounds pretty good on the surface. But don't get your hopes up just yet. The quality in these four projects is abysmal. It's simply just not where it needs to be. These projects may have 50% quality or 40% quality, but I think even worse than that is when you survey the customer regarding customer satisfaction. A lot of times I joke and I say, "Do you remember when you received that handwritten letter from Steven, who lives in the Midwest, where he said, 'I'm so glad you finally built this project or initiative. It's exactly what I asked for 5 years ago. I'm going to use it every day. It's the best thing since sliced bread. I'm so excited for these features.'" If you said yes, I'm looking at you strangely right now. The truth is, nobody cares about what they asked for 5 years ago. 5 years ago, what a customer needs is something completely different than what a customer might need today, which begs the question, how can we shorten this timeline and get things delivered more frequently that provide more value to our end customers? So far, we've delivered four out of the five projects, roughly 50% quality, roughly 20% consumer satisfaction. And the big winner here is zero revenue. You've made no money because you've waited all the way until the completion date to release these four products. Not to mention, you didn't even have a chance to touch the fifth project. So now you have an upset product owner or product manager for the fifth product. You've got four products that have been delivered that are weak. And you've got a company that hasn't made any revenue on these new initiatives for a full 5 year period. Now, the interesting piece is when we talk to this leadership team and we talk to this organization and we ask them, are you practicing Agile? Are you doing Agile? And their answer is affirmatively, yes. 100%. We're all in. We brought in a consulting group or an Agile coach or an Agile organization, and we brought them in to help us really kick this off and launch it. And we're excited about where we are. In fact, we're doing the hyper Agile. I'm like, the hyper Agile? Like, yeah, they go, most organizations have that daily meeting for 10 to 15 minutes a day. We do that daily meeting for 45 minutes a day because we're hyper Agile. I'm like, you're hyper something, but it's not high performing. Ooh. So this organization who preaches that they're doing Agile is doing something that I often refer to as Agile in name only. Agile in name only simply means that the organization proclaims that they're doing Agile until things don't work. And then when things don't work, they turn around and say, we have to blame it on something. So they wind up blaming it on, drum roll, the Agile. They say the Agile is not working correctly, and that's causing them the grief, when in actuality, it was just that they tried to take on too much work at the same time. Let's take a look at company B and see what they might do differently. When we're referring to company A, they took all that time and only got four products or services to market that really didn't provide the exceptional value that people were expecting. At company B, they decided that they were going to align and have that very same meeting that company A had, but they were going to make it a restricted meeting. Now, many of you may not be familiar with what a restricted meeting is. A restricted meeting simply means that if you've ever been to a club of some type before or to any type of exclusive arrangement, that they often have someone at the door with a clipboard or a name list. And on that clipboard, they have a list of names of those people who would be invited to come into the meeting. Now, these might include key stakeholders, they might include product owners, they certainly would include interested parties from the development team, but it would be a small list to keep it down to only 10 to 15, maybe even 20 people in the meeting. The purpose here is to make sure that we have solid communication, that everyone understands the value that's coming from this meeting, and that we have the right number of people in the meeting to make coherent decisions. In this case, they lead the meeting knowing that product number one will be first, two will be second, etc., all the way through to identify the top 5 initiatives that they're going to work on. Now, what's really neat is when they start working on product number one, it's not just one team that's affiliated or associated with working on that project. They follow a mentality of swarming, where they try to get as many of the different teams together as they can to swarm and work on product number one in an effort to get product or service number one to market sooner. Now, in some cases, product number one will have one team that says, whoa, 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 we don't know so much about product number one. Our focus and our primary service is building things like product number two. We've never built a product, or we don't have the skill set to build product number one. In which case, we would have that team peel off and go work on product number two. They can lay the architectural runway or the foundation or whatever is necessary for us to ensure that product number two is going to be successful, instead of trying to muddle through things in product number one and add little value. All 5 of the remaining teams will work on product number one, and they'll swarm to the initiative and try to add whatever value they can. Now, the truth is, there's one team who's going to add lots of value. This team is the one whose primary focus is product number one. Some of the other teams may not add that same value. In fact, I've been challenged in the past and asked, when you add multiple teams to a product or project, how do you prevent them from stepping on each other's toes? Sometimes adding more people to a product or service could cause confusion. It could cause ramping people up or additional training. It could even cause things to slow down or cost more money. But if you go in with the attitude that everyone is going to contribute at the level that they can add value, in which case these teams may not all add the same value, but they will all be adding value towards contributing to the end delivery of the product. I remember once when I was working with an executive, and he explained it this way. He said, quote, "Somebody has to lick the stamp." Now, to me, that was a foreign concept. I was trying to understand, what do you mean by someone needs to lick the stamp? Doesn't he know that all stamps are now pretty much self-adhesive? But then it clicked to me, and I said, I know where he's going with this. Even if you may feel like what you're contributing isn't providing deep value to that product or service, product number one, what you'll discover is that maybe what you're adding is intrinsic value to support the remainder of the teams on product number one to help that product or service make it to market sooner. In fact, if someone doesn't lick the stamp and put it on the envelope, that envelope would never be able to be delivered. In which case, every team is adding some value, even the team that licks the stamp. Now, that made a lot more sense to me. So as the team swarm to work on product number one of the things that we discover is that product number one gets built much more quickly. In fact, at the 1.25 year mark, we were able to adequately deliver product number one, in which case the teams will peel off and go work on product number two. Now, if you remember, product number two is where one of our teams is going and laying that architectural runway. So by the time we get to product number two, things are awesome. We're finding that the teams can all engage on product number two and get that one delivered by the 2.5 year mark. Now, this is where things get interesting. At that 2.5 year mark, we go to work on product number three and discover that product number three no longer adds the value that we initially thought it would at the beginning of this 5 year period. In which case, the product owners and stakeholders make a critical decision that they are going to abandon or bypass product number three. They decide that since it's not going to provide the same value, that it would be a good idea for us to either put it on a backlog and come back to it later, or in some cases, decide not to do it at all and abandon the project altogether. The same decision happened with product number four, where after research at the point here in the center, they discovered that this product or service was not going to add value for the organization. This allowed the teams to quickly pivot and begin working on product number five. Product number five was a high value, high revenue product. We got as many of the teams as we could to swarm and work together to get this product delivered. And they were able to deliver product number five at the 3.75 year mark. Now, what's interesting is product number six was never even part of the picture initially, but now because the team had the ability to abandon three and four, they had the ability to start working on product number six. Now, product number six gets completed by the end of the 5 year timeline. Here's where things are really different between these two products. Company B delivered four products. If you remember correctly, Company A also delivered four products. Now, I'm no wizard at math, but what I can tell you is that 4 equals 4. And in many organizations, they would say that these two have to be the same. Both companies were doing Agile, both companies had 6 teams, both companies worked for 5 years, and both companies delivered 4 products or services. The truth is, they couldn't be any more different. In fact, many of you might be saying, but Lee, there are 3 key differences in Agile delivery. There are things that you didn't take into consideration. Let's take a look at these differences. Difference number 1 revolves around customer satisfaction. I don't know if you've ever worked in a company before where you tried to build something that someone asked for 5 years ago, but many times you'll get that handwritten letter from someone who lives in the Midwest who says, I am so glad you finally got around to building this. In fact, I'm going to use this product or service every day. Now, if you said you remember receiving that letter, I know that's not true. No one would ever write a letter saying that's exactly what I wanted 5 years ago. The truth is the consumer's needs change over time, and there's no way that they can want something that they requested 5 years ago. Our needs have changed, the organization has changed, the product or service has changed, technology has changed. There's lots of things that are different. So what we once thought we wanted might only provide 20% consumer satisfaction, and I think that's an aggressive estimate. Company B, on the other hand, they built 5 products and services. Actually, they finished 4. And they ended up delivering 70 to 90% customer satisfaction. Now, those numbers might seem high, but the truth is, by delivering things every 1.25 years in a cycle, they were able to get customer feedback quickly and make pivots and adjustments so that the organizations were delivering products and services that the customers actually wanted, things that got the customers excited, things that helped them engage. This level of customer satisfaction is not unheard of in Agile organizations that are truly practicing Agile instead of doing Agile in name only. Let's take a look at difference number 2. Difference number 2 talks about eliminating waste. How many times have you worked in an organization before where you've been given a really large budget? $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, whatever that budget might be. And you get halfway through the delivery cycle only to discover that, oh my goodness, this product is just not going to be valuable, or this was just a really bad idea. I know I've been there before. So the question is, what do you do with that remaining budget? Think about it for a second. If you went into your boss's office, the person who funded this project, and it was their baby, their brainchild, and you said, "Hey, this idea that you once thought was a brilliant idea, we've worked halfway through, and we've all decided that this is a really bad idea. So here's half of your money back. Good luck with that." I can tell you now, the result you get is not going to be favorable, right? It's one of those situations where it's hard for you to go back and try to give money back to someone and explain to them that their idea was just not good. So the question is, how do you address this or what do you do? There is a concept that many people discuss that goes along with this and what most organizations struggle with, and it's called sunk cost fallacy. In sunk cost fallacy, what we do is we say we've already invested this much money into this product or service. So why don't we throw just even more money at it or a little more money to it to see if we can get something of value out of it by the end? If we throw a little more money and a little more time at it or a few more people, we're bound to get something of value out of it. The two that strike me as heart attack mode is one, when an organization comes in and says, if we don't spend this money this year, we're not going to get that budget again next year. So go ahead and just do your best and build something because we want to make sure we get that money next year. Ouch. Or how about number two, when you're working on a product or project that may be more facilitated for government or where money has been earmarked for a specific product or service, where people will come to you and just resolutely say that this money has been earmarked for this product or service, and it is against the law. It's illegal. We're not allowed to spend this money on any other initiative. It's scary, but both of these things are the case, and I've heard it multiple times, where this waste just comes to fruition because we are not allowed to reallocate funds, or because someone who has a good idea is aggressively seeking a way to justify their position on building a product or service. It's a nightmare. So in the top, we delivered products number 1, 2, 3, and 4, but 3 and 4 provided zero value. On the bottom timeline, we delivered 1, 2, 5, and 6, but we discovered that 3 and 4 didn't have value at that halfway mark. In this case, we were able to eliminate 200% of the waste because we didn't build products or services that the end consumer did not need or did not want. This is one of the ways that organizations can really adjust their revenue numbers and focus on building products or services that fulfill an outcome instead of just trying to crank out needless output. Let's talk about difference number 3. Difference number 3 is probably the most interesting of the 3, and this has to do with increased revenue. In company A, they worked for the full 5-year period, and they delivered 4 out of the 5 products, but they delivered them all on the end day, which means that they had no opportunity to generate revenue for the organization. So this organization generated a whopping 0 revenue. This is not the place where you want to be. Where company B did the exact opposite. I'm no wizard at math, but if we add this up, product number 6 still delivered 0 value because it was delivered on the last day. But product number 5, it delivered 1.25 years of value. Product number 2 delivered 2.5 years of value, and product number 1 delivered 3.75 years of value. If you add all that together, it comes up with 7.5 years of revenue received times whatever that annual revenue was that are tied to those products or services. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that 7.5 years of revenue is much better than 0 revenue. And the truth is, this is a scalable model. So over time, you can repeat this based on the different number of teams you have in your organization and the different numbers of products or services that you offer. So let's do a quick summary. We said that company A had 20% consumer satisfaction, roughly 200% waste, and generated 0 revenue. Where company B had 100% or near 100% consumer satisfaction, 0 waste, and 7.5 years of product revenue. If I asked any leader within an organization, which one of these companies do you want to emulate, you can already imagine they're going to say, we all want to be company A. We all want to hold hands through the valley of the shadow of death and watch our company's revenue plummet to zero because we don't like our customers. That just sounded silly when I said it. We all know that they want to be company B, right? Everybody wants to be company B. So let's review real quick one other thing that's a hidden aha moment. I know what you're thinking. You haven't given us that sham wow moment yet. But wait, there's more. In company B in this scenario, there's one thing that they really did different. What company B did is they decided that they were going to limit the scope of work in progress, that they were going to implement WIP limits. And by implementing WIP limits, they were able to deliver value faster and they were able to carry these timelines through. So instead of delivering one product every 4 years or 5 years, they were delivering products and services every 1.25 years, which made this completely scalable. But one thing that they also discovered is that over time, they were able to create one of these timelines for each one of their products or services. So now, if they had product number one, they could deliver an iteration of product number one every 1.25 years. And they could also deliver product number two every 1.25 years, in which case, this 7.5 years of product revenue gets scaled per product. So this is a great way to show or illustrate that organizations can really increase customer satisfaction and product delivery by creating a single product line for each of those 5-year periods. Now, one more interesting point is that on occasion you have some teams that'll get burnt out with that model where they're just constantly cranking out new products or services and they'll be ready to tap out and move on to something else, right? So in this model, that 5-year timeline, this organization also created one exclusive 5-year timeline that was dedicated to innovation. So they had an innovation timeline in place where these individuals who were getting burnt out or teams that were getting burnt out could rotate off and work on the innovation timeline so that they could re-engage and come back and build world-class products and services later. So not only are you limiting WIP, but you're expanding the knowledge of the team and giving them an opportunity to work on and cross-pollinate in different products. You're creating a way for your organization to scale using Agile so they can create one of these 5-year timelines for each of the products and services as your organization grows. And you're responsibly limiting WIP and rolling people off on innovation projects when necessary so that you have a workforce that is engaged and ready to go. So the key is to make sure we get to company B. Now, this is a great application at the organization level. The question becomes how to apply these same things at the team level. Now, I know we've all been in this scenario before, at least I have, guilty as charged, where I've been standing there with a round wheel in my hand saying, teams, I have something revolutionary. I have a round wheel and it's going to save us so much time and so much energy. But the teams are so engaged and so busy that they turn to me and they say, Lee, that looks great, but no thanks. We're just way too busy to try that round wheel. These square wheels are working just great for us. And it's amazing to think that teams behave this way. They don't understand that by switching to the round wheel, it's going to make things so much easier for them. But at the same time, if they're so used to doing things the way they always have, that they're stuck in what I call square wheel mentality. So the question becomes, how do we teach people that you don't have to have a square wheel mentality? We start with something called Little's Law. Now, Little's Law is a psychology law, and it applies towards how we engage work and how we consume work. So if we think about this from the team level, we can talk about how Little's Law and Agile are related together because it talks about working products and services that are delivered as frequently as we can. And Little's Law itself states that there are 2 levers you can pull to frequently deliver products and services, to get in a mode where as a team that we can engage and do that swarming that we were talking about earlier. So if you think about this from a perspective of Kanban or traditional Kanban, WIP limits have been explicitly expressed throughout the history of Agile and Scrum. This isn't something that's new. There are two ways that we can apply these little law WIP limit appropriately. The first is to understand that Little's law, also referred to as queuing theory, is cycle time, where we divide WIP by the throughput to figure out how much we can actually get done. And the two levers to pull that you help you deliver faster. The first one has to do with limiting WIP at the team level by applying this to our Kanban board, where in the in progress or in process column, we have a WIP limit at the top that says we as a team will not take on more than this number of backlog items or stories at any given time. This helps the team more frequently deliver so that we can make sure that we're meeting quality standards, we can make sure that we are getting feedback from our stakeholders, and it helps us get things to market a lot faster. The second way is to increase capacity, hire additional people, authorize overtime, automate as much as you can. This also works, but it's very expensive. It is not cheap to do this. So what winds up happening is organizations either have to choose between a huge financial investment, which many organizations complain that Agile is a huge financial investment for this very reason, or you can limit the scope of work in progress by limiting the amount that a team's working on. The goal is to just stop starting new work and start finishing the things that you've committed to. You end up delivering faster by doing less. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is great, but it's not very visual. Wouldn't it be great if we had a visual of this? On the right side of this slide, you'll notice that we have three different pipelines. The top pipeline has to do with the ideal flow. So if you think about this from a flow perspective, if you've ever done plumbing before and you have a pressurized pipe with water inside, the amount of inflow from the front of this pipe should be exactly equal to the amount of outflow that comes out of the other end. And that if we can keep a consistent flow in the pipe, that the pipe should continue to perform and everything should be good. However, in most organizations, when teams are successful, what are they often rewarded with? More work. So if you end up increasing the flow on the left side, which is the reality, and you try to pour more and more water into the pipe, what's going to happen is the team is still only to complete a certain amount of work. They're only able to consume a certain amount and deliver a certain amount. That amount doesn't change. What you'll notice is that the erosion and the divots and the different areas where the water flows at the top of this is indicative of the team trying to do more work. Now, especially in a remote work environment where we're doing hybrid or work from home, a lot of people are noting that in their reviews, they're saying that they find that they're spinning their wheels and doing a lot, but they don't feel like they're getting a lot done. They feel like they're still getting the same amount done they always have, but that they're taking a lot longer time to deliver these things. Now, what's interesting is that when this happens, the flow at the end remains exactly the same as it was in the ideal flow. And when you turn to leadership with this problem, their answer is, let's hire more people. So they hire more people and expand the right side of the pipe. But oftentimes when they do this, this is where it gets interesting, the flow will actually reduce. Because now those teams that were working in a consistent flow and were approaching a point of burnout because they had more work piled on are now also being asked to engage and train and help get other individuals up to speed. So oftentimes you'll see that increasing the flow on the left side and increasing the number of people on the right side actually causes the flow to go all the way down to a dribble, to an indiscernible amount of water going through that pipe. Now, the correct strategy to address this is to make sure that we reduce the intake back to where it was before. We want to make sure that we get the team back to that ideal stage. Then we'll go through and identify any bottlenecks, training initiatives, whatever it is that we have to do in order to help the team be successful. And then we can go back and increase the intake so that we have a more consistent flow, and then go back and address the next bottleneck as we go through. Now, that's a real good visual, but how do you apply it in real life? So, you have to first understand that this started with Kanban, lean manufacturing. Think Toyota quality management or Toyota quality systems. This is where we had WIP limits that were initially applied. This isn't anything new, where we discovered that eliminating waste in the factories and eliminating wasteful movement, and by trying to create an environment where people limiting the amount of work that they had in progress at any given time, that they were able to deliver more effectively, and that the parts and services that they were building had better quality, higher quality standards were being met. So when you're trying to apply this in an agile organization, the best way for you to apply this at the team level is to apply it at the sprint. So if you're going into your sprint planning meeting, instead of doling everything out to every team member, allow team members to sign up for the first item that they want to work on. And each team member chooses one. At the end of sprint planning, go team. We still keep the same amount of work inside of the sprint. We're not changing the velocity. But what we're adding is that now when team members finish the initiative that they're working on, they can go back to the backlog and select the next most important initiative that they feel comfortable completing. With this allows teams to not start working on multiple different things. It enforces that team members should work together and help do peer reviews and pairing and swarming, help deliver high quality and value to the organization and to the end consumer. The other thing that this does is it enforces individual WIP limit. Now, I know what you're thinking. Individual WIP? That sounds kind of crazy. But how many times have you been on a product working, delivering value, adding value, and you're working on a specific backlog item, only to find that you get to a point where you say, I'm bored. Squirrel, I'm going to go work on something else. So you go work on a second item and you're doing great. You get 70 to 75% of the way through. Squirrel, and you go work on a third item. So by the end of the sprint, you end up with 5 to 7 items that are all 85% complete. Last time I checked on our board, there's not a column labeled nearly done. Nearly done is just not good enough. We need to make sure that we're fully delivering the items in our sprints so that we can make sure that we hold higher quality standards and we can recognize the value that comes from delivering those items. It just makes sense. So at the individual level, applying WIP is by not becoming distracted, by not having these outside shoulder taps, by not having this context switching that takes place. If you can help control that via help from your scrum masters and other individuals, so that individuals can stay focused on delivering value at the individual level, teams can pair and peer together to deliver value at the team level, and then ultimately at the organization level, we can cut back on the number of products, projects, and services that we're trying to deliver at any given time. What you'll find is that this succession of events causes the organization to behave better. Now, I do have one closing thought here that's a good secret before we take things away from this. And that is that if you go back to your organization and you insist and say, hey, we can only work on one thing at a time because Lee said so, you can plan on getting fired. No kidding. It's just one of those things. I'm not telling you just work on one thing at a time. What I am asking you is that if, as an organization, you're working on 100 initiatives, how much better would it be if you worked on 50 at a time and still delivered the whole 100 in the same amount of time? Or what if it was 25 or 20 or 10? The point I'm trying to make is by scaling back on the number of initiatives that you're working on, you're still going to be able to deliver the same number of high value products and services. You're just going to get them to market faster with higher quality, and you're going to be able to generate revenue more easily and quickly. It's a simple formula, but in no way do we ever insist that only one thing can be worked on. You have to decide as an organization what makes sense and how you're going to make that scaling happen. So a couple of takeaways. One that you may not have thought of. Many people tell me that Agile does not require pre-work, that you should be able to walk straight into an Agile organization, crank out a backlog, and get to work. Here we go. I'm going to put it on a slide so you can show this to all your peers. You can print it out. You can hang it as a poster in your work area. Agile does require preparation. I'm going to look you in the eye and say it one more time. Agile does require preparation. It doesn't mean that you have to have heavy laden preparation, but it does mean that you have to have some things in place in order for you to be successful, which often begs the next question. That's great, Lee, but where do I start? How does our organization engage in Agile correctly? Agile coaching, after all, in many cases is expensive and something that our organization may not be willing to invest in at this point. One of the tools that we provide for organizations when we go in is something called the Agile 12-step program. Now, I have a background in psychology, so I don't feel guilty writing a 12-step program, but I cranked out this 12-step program as a result of having many organizations ask, where do we get started? How do we get started? Who do we get involved? And these 12 steps, while they don't need to be done in order, and they're not all or nothing, you could be doing just a few of these steps and still have extremely successful Agile within your organization. The key here is that if you do execute these in order and you do incorporate all 12 of them, you'll certainly be well on your way to an Agile implementation. The secret behind this list is that this is a list that I provide to coaches who work for my organization. And when they go into companies, I say, these are the first 12 things that you should be working for. Now, while I'm not going to walk through each of them individually, I'm going to give you some highlights. In the very beginning, you want to identify what problem the organization was trying to solve and why did they choose Agile to solve the problem. If people don't understand why they're doing Agile or what benefit they're trying to get out of it, it makes it hard for them to engage. Sometimes it's a matter of just meeting with leadership and setting a responsible leadership expectation and goals. What are you trying to achieve? One of the techniques that I use to do this that's really, really good is I use the technique called GROW. Now, GROW is an acronym. I'll meet with the executive team and I'll say, what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? And then I'll ask, what is our reality and how far away is that from our goal? Is it a giant chasm that's going to be impossible for us to cross? Or is it something that we can realistically cross and reach that goal? What options or opportunities do we have? What can we do to address these things to get closer to our goal? And then finally, what will you commit to do today as an organization? I think it's important to make sure that we incorporate all four of those, because when you're talking with leadership, that's going to help them identify and understand what their North Star is and where they're trying to go. Identify a distinction of every Agile role, organize your backlog, make sure you have your meeting sound. These are all steps that you can do internally. So your homework, when you leave this session, I encourage you to take this 12-step document and I want you to go through it and talk about your team or your group within your organization and mark it up. If it's something that your organization's doing well and you're awesome at it, go ahead and put a check mark on it. If it's something that you feel like we're doing but there's room for growth, give it a hyphen or a dash saying that we have room for growth here. If it's something that you feel like your organization hasn't even embarked on, go ahead and mark it with an X. And that shows that there's room for improvement and room for growth. And what I want you to do as the homework part is set your calendar for 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days from now to go back and reevaluate these 12 steps and see exactly where you fall. So you can see where points of improvement are, and so you can see where other opportunities are for you to do better. So in conclusion, number one, if everything is important, nothing's important. Organizations need to get past the thought that everything has to be the highest priority, which leads to number two, priority equals urgency and not importance. The truth is everything you're asking for is important, but everything can't be the hottest, most urgent item. Number three, organizations should leverage WIP at the organizational level, the team level, and the individual level. Number four, learn about and practice Little's Law. Number five, we just discussed that Agile requires some preparation. You need to be ready in order to implement Agile in your organization successfully. And finally, if you want to learn more about this topic or any others, you can reach out to us. We'd love to engage with you and talk to you about these topics. We've got so many things going on that we're excited about. Take a listen to the podcast. Go and download a couple of the documents or white papers. There's lots of opportunities for us to help you get better at Agile and so that you can have opportunities to really engage and see your organization grow. In conclusion, I know there's lots of things that you could have done this day, but I want to say thank you for spending a few short moments with me. I know that time is your most valuable asset. And whenever you take time out to carve out an opportunity for you to learn, grow, and expand your knowledge, it's going to help you be a better person, both in the workplace and outside. Thanks again for being amazing, and I appreciate your time. And I hope that we engage again sometime soon. Until next time, do take care.